Welcome class. In this particular session, we are going to discuss the special type of water transport mechanism in plants, that is imbibition, and followed by that we will be discussing regarding long distance transport of water molecules. So first we'll see what is meant by imbibition. So imbibition can be defined as a special type of diffusion when water is absorbed by the solids or the colloids, causing them to enormously increase in their volume. So in case of imbibition, what happens is first water molecules, they get absorbed on the solids or the colloids or to the surface or to the matrix. And once they are absorbed, eventually they are absorbed internally, and this ultimately results in enormous increase in their volume. So this phenomenon can be seen in case of swelling of the resins or the swelling of the seed coat when it is placed soaked in the water. So all these are examples for imbibition. And in case of imbibition, mainly two components take parts. One is imbibant and another one is the imbibate. So what is meant by this imbibant? So the solid surface on which the liquid or water is absorbed. So that is called as imbibant. That is solid particles which imbibe the water or any other liquids, they are called as imbibants. And imbibates are the liquid molecule that has been absorbed on the solid particle. So that is called as imbibate. So liquid that is taking part in imbibition is imbibate, and solid surface will be the imbibant. And here in the process of imbibition, there is no involvement of membranes. So as we can see in osmosis, the plasma membrane will be involved. So such membrane involvement is not there in case of imbibition. And here the water molecules, they are held by means of the intermolecular forces. The force that is exhibited between the colloidal surface as well as the water molecules. So this force, it helps in holding the water on the matrix or the solid surface. And here during the process of imbibition, the pressure that is developed is called as imbibition pressure. And for imbibition to occur, two conditions are essential. So one is the water potential gradient between the imbibant and imbibate. And another one is affinity for the imbibed substance in the imbibant. Okay, so how much the imbibant is having affinity towards the liquid. So that determines the rate of imbibition. Similarly, the water potential gradient between the imbibant and imbibate, that also determines the rate of imbibition. And during imbibition, water molecules, they get tightly absorbed and they become immobile. So as a result, so most of the energy, kinetic energy that is present, it will be lost in the form of heat. So during the process of imbibition, we can see the generation of heat. So this can be clearly seen in case of kneading of the flour. So kneading of the wheat flour or any flours when they are kneaded. Okay, so generally these flours will be having a husk that will be made up of cellulosic fibers. So this husk acts as a colloidal material. So when water is absorbed here and due to continuous kneading, the kinetic energy will be lost and it will be generated. It will be released out in the form of a heat. So that can be seen in this process when you keep the kneaded flour for resting period. So on the covered surface, you can see the formation of water vapor. So that represents the heat loss in case of the kneaded fluid. So that is one example for imbibition. So next, coming to the long distance transport of water. So we know that we have seen the importance of water in the previous session. So in case of plants, so cell to cell movement of water, it can occur through simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, or through the active transport and all. But if this water molecule has to be transported from root to the shoot in case of taller plants, so that simple diffusion and all won't be helpful. So for that to occur, so plants will be developing certain, so plants have developed certain specialized vascular structures called as xylem as well as the phloem. So this xylem and phloem, so they act as a special long distance transport system which moves the molecule across long distance, and the movement will be at a much faster rate. And initially, during the long distance transport of molecule to occur, first water has to be absorbed. So absorption of water and minerals is facilitated by the root hairs that is present in the tip of the roots through the simple diffusion. And this diffusion, it occurs from soil solution to the root hairs. And once it is absorbed by the root hairs, so now the water will be moving into the deeper parts of the root layer, such as root cortex, then the vascular bundle of the root by means of two distinct pathways that is called as apoplast as well as symplast. So what is meant by apoplast and symplast? We'll see. So this apoplast and symplast pathway, it is very important concept here. Related to this, the questions can be asked in case of NEET examination. So here looking into the term apoplast, where apo refers to above and plast refers to protoplast. So we have already defined what is meant by protoplast. So it is the cell, plant cell which is devoid of the cell wall, that is called as protoplast. So in case of apoplast pathway, what is going to happen? So water will be moving above the protoplast. That says that water won't be entering inside the cell. So here water movement, it just occurs across the cell wall as well as the intercellular spaces. So in the intercellular spaces as well as the across the cell wall, the water molecules will be freely moving here. So this movement of water will be through the process of simple diffusion. So water molecules will be just moving through the simple diffusion once it is absorbed by the root hairs. So that is called as apoplast pathway. So water will be not entering into the protoplast, it will be moving across the protoplast or above the protoplast and freely in between the intercellular spaces. And here I said that water can move freely across the cell wall. So you may ask the question whether cell wall doesn't act as any barrier. So with respect, if you see the nature of cell wall, so it is one of the dead layer found in case of cell and it is freely permeable. It is freely permeable in nature. So it is freely permeable to any kind of the molecules. It doesn't act as a barrier as that of plasma membrane. So hence here, there will be no any restriction for the water movement through the across the cell wall. So that is regarding apoplast pathway. Whereas coming to the symplast. So in case of symplast, the term sim or syn, it refers to within. And already you know what is meant by plast, that is protoplast. So in case of symplast, what happens? So water will be entering into the cell. So water absorbed by the root hairs, it enters into the cortical cells of the roots, and from one cell to another cell, it will be transported through that of the plasmodesmatal connection. So here it is labeled that you can see where exactly plasmodesmata is present. So plasmodesmata is the thin cytoplasmic connection which connects the two adjacent cells together. Okay, so here only the middle lamellae followed by the plasma membrane will be there. So that forms the pit or the small opening or a channel that is called as plasmodesmata, through which the water molecules will be absorbed through the osmosis. So in case of symplast, the water molecules will be moving into the cell and this process will be favored through the osmosis. So that is regarding apoplast as well as the symplast. So in case of roots, if we can see both apoplast and symplast pathway. That is because comparatively apoplast is the faster process than that of the symplast, because in symplast cytoplasmic exchange of water molecule takes place, cytoplasmic streaming will be there, so the movement of water will be slower. Whereas in apoplast, as it is moving across cell wall and the intercellular spaces, there is no any barriers or there is no any exchange of molecules, water will be freely moving through the spaces that are available. So hence movement of water molecule through the apoplast will be faster than that of the symplast pathway. And if we look in case of the root cells, so water will be absorbed by the root hairs, so from the soil solution, and this will be through the process of simple diffusion. And along with the water molecules, root hairs, they also absorb the mineral ions. Okay, And here the absorption of mineral ions, it occurs through the active transport. So why it is through active transport? So in case of root cells, if we see the concentration of mineral ions, so mineral concentration in case of root sap, it will be higher than that of the soil solution. So in order to uptake the mineral ions, what happens? So the root cells, so they will actively accumulate more number of solutes by using ATP as an energy. So this gradient, it allows the mineral ions along with the water to diffuse into the root cell. So that is how mineral ions and water will be uptaken. So once the root heads uptake water and mineral ion, so first it will pass through the epiblemma. From the root heads, it passes through epiblemma, and from the epiblemma, it enters to the root cortex, and further from the root cortex, it enters to endodermis. So endodermis, it acts as the outermost barrier for the inner vascular tissues. Okay, so from epiblemma till the endodermis, there will be water transportation through the apoplast pathway. So it occurs through apoplast pathway because in root cortex there will be large intercellular spaces and water can easily diffuse here. Once the water molecule reaches the endodermis, so in case of endodermis, in the tangential walls, there will be a suberized material that is called as Casparian strips, and this Casparian strip, they are impermeable to water. So it is impermeable to water. So as it won't allow the water to pass through it. Now, freely through the spaces, water cannot pass through the endodermis because in the radial walls and all, there will be presence of this Casparian strips. So as a result, what happens? Once the water reaches the endodermis, it will immediately switch on to the symplast pathway. So in the symplast, as we have seen, so water will enter into the cell. So here from the endodermis to xylem vessel, water will be transported through symplast pathway. That is, water will enter into the endodermal cell. From there, it will enter to the pericycle, and from the pericycle, it will be entering into the root vascular bundle or the steel portion of the root. And now, once the water reaches the xylem, so xylem, already we know the xylem is made up of dead components itself. The xylem, tracheids, vessels, fibers, all are dead components except for xylem parenchyma. So water will be transported through xylem vessels as well as the tracheids. So as a result, now once the water reaches the xylem, now it will immediately switch on to the apoplast pathway, and further it travels along the root xylem, and from there it will be transported up to the shoot. So that is how we can see apoplast and symplast pathway in case of the transport of water in case of the root layers. So that is regarding apoplast and symplast pathway. So next we'll see the process called as ascent of sap. So what is meant by this ascent of sap? So once the water and mineral ions reaches the root xylem, from there it has to be transported to the shoot tip, right? And the process of movement of sap from the root towards the tip of the stem branches and leaves, that is called as ascent of sap. That is, the liquid along with the mineral content, it will be raising in an upward direction, and this process will be occurring against the force of gravity. And this process of ascent of sap, it can be best explained through root pressure as well as the transpiration pull. So what is meant by this root pressure and transpiration pull? We'll see in detail. So first, coming to the root pressure. So in order to explain the ascent of sap, a theory called as root pressure theory has been postulated by the scientist called as Joseph Priestley in the year 1916. And according to root pressure theory, the term root pressure refers to, it is the positive pressure that is developed due to active transportation of various ions from the soil into the vascular tissues of the roots along with the water potential. That is, when the ions as well as the water is transported along the root layers. Okay, so pressure will be developed within the root cells, and that positive pressure that is built up, that is called as root pressure. And this increases the pressure inside the xylem. Okay, so as the root pressure is built up, okay, so this pressure will further increase the xylem, because all the water and mineral ion will be carried to that of the root xylem, so that the root xylem, it will be feeling a greater pressure within it, and this pressure will be sufficient enough for pushing the water in an upward direction to the smaller distance or to the smaller heights in case of the stem. And if you look in case of magnitude of the root pressure, it will be almost up to 2 bars or 2 atmospheres. So that will be the magnitude of the root pressure. It is a smaller magnitude. And if we want to explain ascent of sap with reference to root pressure theory, it will be applicable only for the shorter plants such as herbs as well as the grasses and all, because they will be having shorter stem. But in case of taller plants, this root pressure theory won't be applicable, because the pushing force will be very smaller, and it can transport water only up to the small heights in case of stem. But where exactly we can see this root pressure? So this root pressure can be significantly seen in the phenomenon called as guttation, which is seen in case of grass blades as well as the herbaceous plants and all. Similarly, this root pressure, even though it may not be helpful in significant ascent of sap, but it is important to re-establish the continuous chain of water molecules in case of xylem. So if this continuous chain of water molecules is formed, then only the transportation of the water molecules will be continuous in case of plant from root to shoot. And now coming to the guttation. So how we can define this guttation? So guttation can be defined as loss of water in the liquid phase. That is, water will be lost in the form of liquid droplets near the tips of the leaf blades and leaves of many herbaceous plants through the special opening that is called as hydatodes. So in case of guttation, because of the root pressure, what happens? That pressure, it pushes the water up to certain height in case of stem, and this pressure will be maximum in the early morning as well as late night, so that some of the cell sap, they exude out or they will come out, and they gets deposited in the leaf margin in case of herbaceous plants and all, and that phenomenon, it is called as guttation. And this guttation is one example for the effect of root pressure. So next one is transpiration pull theory. So this transpiration pull theory, it is widely accepted theory in order to explain the ascent of sap in case of the taller plants. And this transpiration pull theory, it is also called as cohesion tension theory, which was originally proposed by Dickson and Joly in the year 1894, and further this has been improvised by Dickson in the year 1940. And according to transpiration pull theory, it says that the phenomenon called as transpiration, it will be responsible for pulling the water from the root to shoot. So in root pressure, water will be pushed from root to shoot, whereas in transpiration pull theory, transpiration helps in pulling the water from root to shoot. So when water is pulled upwards, so it will be pulled in a greater force as well as at the faster rate. So that is how the long distance transport of the water can be seen in case of taller plants. So ascent of sap can be explained through the transpiration pull theory. And this transpiration pull theory, it is mainly based on the different properties such as cohesive and adhesive property of a water, transpiration pull, or it is also called as surface tension, and next one is the capillarity. So these are the three processes that are used to explain the transpiration pull theory. So what is meant by this cohesion? So cohesion refers to attraction between water molecules. So attraction between similar molecules or the water molecules, that is called as cohesion. So as water molecules, they get attracted with each other, they form the continuous water column, and water molecules will be held by the intermolecular forces. And coming to the adhesion. So here the term adhesion refers to attraction between water as well as it is attraction between the water molecule as well as the xylem elements, or through the attraction between water molecules and xylem vessels and tracheids. So that is called as adhesion. So because of this attraction, so water molecules, they will be attached to the surface of the xylem tracheids or the xylem vessels, so that they can be transported through the xylem elements or through the xylem. And coming to the surface tension, so due to attachment of water molecule or attraction of water molecule between themselves as well as to the xylem, so it develops certain tension, or it builds up certain pressure within them, and that is called as surface tension, which is formed due to the formation of water column. And next one is capillarity. So capillarity refers to raise of liquid. So it is raising of liquid through the narrow tubes or through the narrow lumen. So raise of liquid through the narrow lumen, it can be considered as capillarity. So where exactly this narrow lumen can be found? So it can be seen in case of xylem tracheids as well as the xylem vessels. So if you see the structure of xylem tracheids, so it will be having two tapering ends with the narrow lumen, that is the space, whereas the xylem vessels, it will be somewhat cylindrical in nature. So it will be having the luminal space. So through this luminal space, the water column will be raising in upward direction, and this process is called as capillarity. And all this will be necessary for the transpiration pull to occur in case of the plants. And most of the plant, they meet their water requirement by this transpiration pull itself. So how exactly this transpiration pull theory explains the ascent of sap, we'll see in this particular diagram. So during the transpiration pull, so what happens is, so water will be lost through the transpiration through the stomata. So stomata will be present in the leaf epidermis, both in the upper and lower epidermis. So as water is continuously lost through the stomata, that is through the transpiration, what happens? The turgidity of the guard cell decreases. So first step is transpiration. So that is loss of water through the transpiration. Okay, so loss of water through transpiration, it decreases turgidity of the guard cell. So as the turgidity of the guard cell decreases, now it withdraws the water from the adjacent mesophyll. So it withdraws water from adjacent mesophyll. So mesophylls are nothing but the parenchymatous cells which are containing chloroplast within the leaves. They are called as mesophyll. So now here you can see the water molecules are withdrawn from the adjacent mesophyll, so that the guard cell will become turgid now, and the mesophyll cells, they will lose the water. So this water requirement, so it will be met by withdrawing the water from the adjacent xylem. Okay, so this, as the water is withdrawn from the mesophyll, so now mesophyll cells, they withdraw the water from the leaf xylem. So as a result, what happens in the xylem elements, that water column will be completely drawn into the mesophyll cells. So as a result, now this tension or this pressure for the water requirement, it moves down towards the stem, and the entire water column present in the stem xylem, it will be pulled upward towards the leaf. And as this pressure travels in an opposite direction, and as it finally reaches the root hairs, now the root hairs, they tend to absorb more and more water from the soil solution, so that the continuity of the water column will be maintained, and that water column that is formed in the stem, it will be drawn upwards towards the leaf because of continuous water loss through transpiration. So this is how The water will be pulled upwards from root to shoot through the process of transpiration. So that is how the cohesion tension theory or transpiration pull theory, it explains about the uptake of water as well as mineral ions or ascent of sap in case of plants. So in the next session, we are going to discuss about transpiration as well as the mechanism involved in closing and opening of stomata in detail.